Hello fellow astrologers, and welcome back to our brand new astrology keyring series, the C+D Basic Birth Chart series. And this video is the third video in our Taylor Swift birth chart breakdown, where we go over her traditional planets. In our last video, CD1L, we went over how we compiled the data from the birth chart and the natal data. And then we went into greater detail about all of her luminaries, which are her sun, her moon, and the ascendant. In this video, we're going to go over our little breakdown of all of her traditional planets, which are the inner planets and the mid planets, minus the luminaries. Show you how it corresponds over here on the wheel, on the chart wheel. Then we'll come back and actually see what Google has to say about each one of these. And when we're there, we're going to actually see what also one of the web pages from the Google search has to say about as well, to kind of sum it all up. So let's start with the Mercury in Capricorn and the rest of the inner planets. The inner planets are all the fast-moving planets. Matter of fact, Mercury makes 3 trips around the sun every year, and Venus makes 2 trips every year, where Mars is about every 2 years it takes to make 1 trip. So all these planets move pretty fast in comparison to the mid planets and the generational planets. But first we're going to talk about Mercury. And in this case, her Mercury was in Capricorn. Now when we looked at the other videos, we found out that these planets don't move very fast during the course of 1 day. And they're going to be pretty much in the same sign no matter what time of day you cast a chart, unless they were actually on a cusp, and then they might be changing at some point in that day. But it's very rare. In this case, Mercury only travels about 2.25 degrees forward or 1 degree back, depending on if it's retrograde, in a day maximum. So it's not going to change very much. Again, unless it's on the cusp. And when you're just doing planets and you're not doing any kind of other advanced astrology where you're doing transits or synastry, the exact degree is not necessary. You're just really looking to find out what the actual sign is. And for this case, her Mercury is in Capricorn. Now, Mercury is the planet of communication. It talks about how you communicate a lot. And when you communicate with others, it can show how it links up when you do synastry or transits. When you're doing synastry, it can show you how you can communicate with others. And with transit, it can show how you could have communication issues or maybe have some great communication going on for that day. So let's read a little bit about what Capricorn and Mercury is. Capricorn and Mercury, a practical, strategic thinker with a disciplined mind. Communication is measured, organized, and grounded in results. Capricorn Mercury excels at planning, managing details, and speaking with authority. Patience and responsibility guide thought processes, favoring long-term success over quick wins. So in the earlier video, we were debating whether Taylor Swift had a Capricorn or a Scorpio ascendant. And I did mention how she is very career-minded and she's done a very good job with her career. But it doesn't necessarily mean that she had that ascendant, because when we go over here, you see that she has a bunch of planets over here in Capricorn. And Capricorn is a very career-minded sign. Matter of fact, it rules the midheaven, and the midheaven talks a lot about career and aspirations on how you do things. And when you have a lot of Capricorn like this, it can show that it's a person who's very career-minded. As a matter of fact, once upon a time, Garth Brooks was once asked at a talk show what it's like to be one of the greatest musicians ever in country western singing. He actually said he isn't really the greatest, he's just really good at business himself. There's a lot of other artists out there that were better at music than he was. He just understands the industry, which made him really good at being big in the business. And you can see right here, Taylor Swift has a lot of that herself as well, which is one of the reasons why she's had such a long and lasting career. She's got a lot of this here, a lot of Capricorn over here in her second house that's driving her to be very ambitious with her career. Granted, we don't know if that's for sure her second house because we're not sure what time she was born, but this right here also lends to the idea that maybe she is a Scorpio ascendant, because right here, this put together can have a lot of strength at moving her forward. And we'll touch on it a little bit more when we get to these other planets. Now let's go over here to Google and see what Google has to say about Mercury in Capricorn. Signifies a mind that is practical, logical, and organized with communication that is precise and clear. People with this placement tend to be disciplined, strategic thinkers who focus on realistic long-term goals. While they can be very detail-oriented, their approach is grounded in tangible results in serious matters. Which shows that she has a way of talking very practically and down to earth with anything that she communicates on, with a focus on a lot of long-term goals and being realistic. And as you can see here, Google gets into a little bit more detail on what they mean by a lot of these different things. You can also do the deeper dive. But remember, every time you click on the link that we have, it'll always be a little bit different because Google's always switching it up. So let's scroll down here and take a look. I gotta be honest, I've actually been through a bunch of these already, and most of it is not telling us what we're asking for because Google is giving me Vedic or transits and not what I actually searched for. So we have to go to page 2 to find somebody that actually knows what they're talking about the subject, which can be one of the frustrating things about searching this information. But let's use, go ahead and use astrology.com because they're actual Western astrology and talk about the actual subject we asked for as opposed to what Google gave us. Okay, this placement is slow, methodical, and focused on small steps that will form the foundation for long-term success. Communicating when Mercury is in Capricorn can feel dry and work obsessed, but try to remember that you're sowing the seeds to reap the benefits later. As practicality is the order of the day, it's easy to suffer from a sense of tunnel vision during these times. Remember to pick your head up and to take a deep breath every now and then. This is a good little touch on the topic. They go on to talk a little bit more about how it's an Earth cardinal sign, shows you some of its positive traits and its negative traits. We get down in here, we talk a little bit about the personality. It does mention how they can be very thoughtful in how they speak and how they can be a little bit meticulous in how they planned it. And being so heavily processed, they tend to be very concise. They're patient, but they don't waste time because time is money. But it doesn't mean they're completely stodgy because they do have a little bit of humor, which tends to be a little dry. But it's still there for sure. So to get more into some of the positive and negative traits, this is a good little touch on what a Mercury in Capricorn is. So it's worth coming back. And one thing to mention, don't be afraid to go to the second tier to look for stuff. Matter of fact, the more I'm looking here, I'm seeing more pages that are better taught, that touch on like tarot, or astro.com, especially Cafe Astrology. A lot of these other pages are great pages to go to. And to be honest, they're much better than the initial results, which are a bunch of Vedic stuff and transit stuff, even though we asked for natal in Western astrology. But let's go back. So it does show that she has a very practical mind in how she communicates and how she does things. And that does lend to maintaining a career in the industry. So I think this is an excellent example of one of her traits. Now let's move on to Venus. As you see here, her Venus is in Aquarius. It's 1 degree, 51 minutes. 1 degree, 50 minutes. It's kind of the cusp there, so it has a little bit of Capricorn to it as well from being cuspy with it, but it's mostly into Aquarius here. Venus does move approximately 1.2 degrees direct and 0.6 degrees backwards if it's in retrograde. In this case, it's not. If it was retrograde, it would have one of these little R's, but it doesn't have an R. It was going direct at the time. So let's read a little bit about what Aquarius and Venus is. This Venus loves with individuality and friendship at the core. Relationships need intellectual stimulation and freedom to evolve. Aquarius Venus values authenticity and equality, often drawn to unconventional or forward-thinking partners. Love expresses thought, ideas, ideals, and shared vision for the future. So Aquarius Venus can be a little idealistic and take a very intellectual approach to their relationships. They need to be able to communicate. All air signs are about communications. And when you're talking about how you're receptive in love or in relationships, it's not just love. It could also be money and finances. But how you do it, you want to take an intellectual approach. Air signs in Venus can sometimes be a little aloof on their approach, but it is a fixed sign, so it does like a certain bit of stability when it looks at a relationship. But it's looking for it from an intellectual perspective and not necessarily all feels. But let's look at what Google has to say about Aquarius Venus. Natal Venus in Aquarius indicates a person who values intellectual connection, freedom, and equality in relationships. They are often attracted to partners who are unique, independent, and engaging on a mental level. Love language may include verbal affirmation and intellectual stimulation, and they may express affection through friendship and shared ideas rather than traditional romantic gestures. So that just reiterates what we were saying earlier, that it's not always froofy feels. It looks for more of that intellectual connection when it's trying to connect to others. Venus is a lot about receptivity as opposed to Mars, which is more projecting, how you project things, how you act and your action. This is more how you receive things. Maybe one of the reasons why she took a few relationships to find just the right one, because she didn't find that connection and the equality that she was looking for. Let's go down here and see what some of these other sites might have to say. Cafe Astrology is pretty good. Astrology's good, but they usually have very short answers. All right, let's look and see what Tarot.com has to say. Okay. Venus is the planet that guides our desires, our money, and our one-to-one relationships. Because Aquarius is a sign of friendship, it seems like its energy would work quite well with that of loving Venus. But Aquarius can be emotionally detached sign, which could put a confusing spin in love and intimate relationships while Venus spends time here. So yes, in relationships, typically you want something that has a little bit more feeling and sensitivity, and Aquarius is not quite a sensitive sign. It looks at things kind of intellectually. When it comes to emotions and sensitivity, Aquarius can be quite insensitive. So there can be that detachment. Let's scroll down here. What else do we have to say? It goes on to talk about that more. Between love and friendship, it's a very thin line. It even talks right here, is like, we could be written off as just friends. So, unfortunately, sometimes Aquarius can be the friend-zoning Venus, which could be another reason why she's gone through a number of relationships, because a number of guys ended up seeming to be more like a friend than somebody she wants to settle down for a relationship. Yeah, it talks right here. It's less based on emotions like the other signs, and rely more on their head than their heart when it's relating to others. It even goes on to say here, a committed relationship, Venus in Aquarius lightens the level of intimacy and encourages us to reconnect with honesty, friendship, and common interests. That's a pretty good touch. I'm not going to go too in detail. It looks like it's got a good bit of information and it may be worth coming back to. But let's go back. It's a good little touch on Aquarius and Venus from a couple of different perspectives. And it does kind of point out Miss Swift may have had a hard time settling down on somebody. It's why she has probably gone through a number of her relationships because of their approach to the relationship. She looks at friends and the friendship, and she looks at it intellectually more so than the feelings. Doesn't mean she's a bad person. It's just she wants to take some time to think about it before she settles down. It's not a bad thing to get hasty about a relationship and take some time to think about it. But you got to be careful not to overthink it. And that's a good look at her receptivity. Now let's look at her projectivity. Mars is the other half of it. It's how she projects herself. In this case, she's got Mars in Scorpio. As you can see right here, Mars, 26 degrees Scorpio, 26 degrees Scorpio. Now, Mars is the old ruler of Scorpio. Back before we knew what Pluto was or it even existed, Mars was the ruler of Scorpio. So Scorpio does have a lot of natural strength in Mars. It's very passionate and focused. Let's do a little reading here and then we'll get into it in a little bit more detail. Mars in Scorpio channels passion with focus and intensity. Energy is controlled yet deeply powerful, driven by desire for mastery and transformation. Motivation runs on emotional fuel once committed. This Mars never gives up. Sexual magnetism and fierce determination defines this placement. So where she's more intellectually receptive, over here she's more intuitively projective. She has a very intense passion for being driven for her focus, for where she's going and what she's going after in life. Put together with a sexual magnetism that can draw people in. If we knew this was her birthday definitively and it was this close to the ascendant, we'd know that these two would work off each other and intensify these personality traits. But we don't for sure. So before we get more deep into it, let's see what Google has to say. Scorpio Mars is a powerful and intense position signifying a person with strategic minds, immense determination, and a deep drive to pursue their goals. This placement is known for its strategic, passionate, and powerful nature and influences how an individual asserts themselves, handles conflicts, and pursues their ambition with unwavering intensity. So yes, that just reinforces all of that. Scorpio Mars has an intense drive and it's laser beam focused with an unflinching persistence. When it sees what it wants, it locks in and goes straight for it, which is a trait that naturally embodies what Mars is in general. Mars is that planet of projectivity. It's how you assert yourself. It's how you take action. And in this case, it's laser beam focused at going straight for what they want. And this, I think, does very much so personify a lot about how she's been in her career and her life and all of her pursuits. She's focused on what she's going for and she's going to achieve it. And she has. She's had a lot of success with this. Now you can go down here and look at what they go into greater detail about what that means, and it does mention a lot more of that. And you can also do the deeper dive. But let's go down here and see what the other pages have to say. Okay, let's scroll down and see here. This is talking about Mars in general and her own things. But let's go down here to natal Mars because that's what we're looking for. Warrior god Mars is magnificent in Scorpio. You bring a martial arts sensibility to every assertion or any form of competition. Mars shows how you goal stalk, get mad, or face adversity. In your case, you are beyond resilient. You aren't fragile and able to thrive through conditions that would cause others to crumple or abandon the ambition. Excellent. I like how they mentioned the warrior god Mars. Well, one of the reasons why it shared it because it was not only the warrior god, it was also Athena, the goddess of wisdom and combat, which Scorpio more embodies than Mars, or Aries, the god of war. In this case, Scorpio more embodies the Athena aspect, the more wisdom of combat. It mentions the regenerative and the obsessive nature of Scorpio and the transformative nature of it as well. And also mentions how you can have intense arousal of opposition because the average person is just used to complacency. But that's not what this sign's about. It's about intensely piercing through things and changing. It does go on to mention the downside of the Scorpio Mars, being that you might spend too much time seething or being venomous towards others. If you think you've been slighted, you might get a little vengeful. Might be one of the reasons why some of her songs got a lot of mean things to say about some of her past relationships, because it can be a little vindictive about how you've connected with others and how you've may seen opposition when you try to assert yourself as a Scorpio Mars. As she says, haters gonna hate, hate, hate. But it doesn't mean you can't just move on through and blast through it and go and stay focused on where you're heading. So let's go back here. And yes, Scorpio Mars is really good for staying laser focused on your goals, moving forward. Got to be careful sometimes sitting too much, seething on wrongs that may have happened to you and trying to be vindictive. That could be one of the setbacks as a Mars Scorpio. You just have to get back on track on that focus and move forward. But Mars isn't just about relationships. It's about how you take action. It's how you deal with adversity. And it can tell a lot about how we overcome our obstacles in life. And that's a good touch on the inner planets. Now we need to move on to the mid planets. The mid planets, Jupiter and Saturn, are your major benefact and your major malefact. It shows a lot of how things can be beneficial and how you come across some of those things, as well as your limitations on certain things and how you approach those. Let's start out with Jupiter in Cancer. If you look over here, you see it's opposing her Mercury over here, 7 degrees Jupiter. We'll talk a little bit more about oppositions when we get into aspects in advanced birth charts. Now, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, which means it's the second best sign that Jupiter can be in, where Sagittarius is the ruler of Jupiter. Cancer is the exalted position. Cancer's a great position to have your Jupiter. Let's read the paragraph and talk a little bit more about that. Jupiter in Cancer expands through caring and emotional connection. Nurturing others brings luck and growth. This placement enhances intuition and empathy, rewarding acts of kindness and generosity. Family and home and traditions are sources of spiritual and material abundance. Miss Swift is known for donating a lot of her time and energy to help out things like disaster relief, education and literacy, health and medical, and she's also known to give a lot behind the scenes, like during some of her massive tours. She's reportedly gave large bonuses to her crew and hired many local suppliers and businesses along the route to help support local economies and do a lot of things that really help the community, which is an awesome thing. More big people should show more interest in helping the little guy out and doing something, because everybody could use a leg up, especially in this day and age where not everybody cares so much. Cancer Jupiter is one of those kind of signs that go out there and do those kind of things, and doing things that are good for the community to help not only themselves but everyone as a whole. More people should show those kind of qualities. But let's go over here and see what Google has to say about that. Jupiter in Cancer signifies an individual with a nurturing, compassionate, and generous nature, particularly concerning family, home, and emotional connections. This placement is considered exalted, meaning Jupiter can express its quality of expansion and abundance in its fullest potential. Individuals with this placement often find meaning and purpose through caring for others, are naturally supportive, and may experience greater ease in areas relating to security, comfort, and prosperity. So yes, that reiterates that whole compassion for the greater all, for making sure that there's expansion for everybody and sharing in the abundance. And that's something she's shown a lot in her life. By not just miserly hoarding it all, but making a difference and touching all the people around her and making sure to let them know that it's made a difference in her life. Now, if you go here, you can see that they go in a lot more detail than normal for Google searches to tell you more about what those things are. And you can do the deeper dive. But let's go down here and see what the other pages have to say. Let's scroll down here and see what we have. Old Farmer's Almanac, that's actually for that year. Johnny's not bad. This is Vidic. You know what? Let's go back here. Jupiter's Realm has to say. Alright, let's scroll down and see what it has to say. This right here talks about Jupiter in general, and then it talks about Cancer, how it is part of the moon, so it took them out separately. It mentions how Cancer is the exalted position for Jupiter. But let's go down here and see what it says about Jupiter in Cancer in a natal. The protective principles of Cancer together with the beneficence of Jupiter can indicate lucky breaks, fortuitous events, saving graces, or avoiding adverse outcome. Almost like having a guardian angel. It goes on to talk about, with Jupiter in Cancer, some things flow together with great ease and satisfaction, where meaning and purpose can be found, with potential to access joy and contentment or overcome difficulties. General placement shows a notable respect and wealth or large family or highly regarded woman. I think she is a lot of that, a highly regarded woman with a lot of notable respect and wealth. And it looks like they have quite a bit more information down here that you can get into it. Might be worth a deeper dive to come back, but I don't want to linger too much on the page. Let's go back. And yes, that shows an excellent example how she's had a bit of a guardian angel look over her shoulder, even in the face of adversity. I can even remember way back in the day when Kanye was a jerk to her at the MTV Music Awards, but that didn't stop the guardian angels from coming around and rising her back up and shining on her more respect for her work and her determination that she deserved despite the adversity she faced. And I'm sure this little cluster all together does a lot of work to help her move forward on all of those things. Jupiter is the planet of luck, higher expansion, and greater fortunes. This is an excellent example of how things have turned out to be fortunate for her in her life. It does personify a lot of things that does happen for her. But now let's look at the planet of limitation. Saturn. Saturn is a planet of limitation. It's one of those planets that hold people back. But in this case, she's also very lucky because her Saturn is in Capricorn. And Capricorn is the ruler. If you look right here, Saturn in Capricorn, it's the ruler of Saturn. And as you can see, it has this stellium over here. So I'm sure this energy over here works together to make a lot of stuff happen. So even though it's the planet of limitation, she has the ruler at the wheel. So it's going to help guide it a lot better and keep it focused on track to make it work together. So let's read a little bit what the paragraph has to say. Saturn in Capricorn operates in its own sign, emphasizing discipline, responsibility, and ambition. Life lessons revolve around authority, structure, and perseverance. Achievement comes through consistent effort and self-control, leading to lasting success and built on solid foundation. The Saturn is a disciplinary planet. It's a lot about what you need to learn, but not necessarily what you want to learn. It gives you a lot of those hard lessons. And when you have Capricorn at the wheel, it helps out a lot because you can accept it better. You already have the right mentality for going into these kind of things to set up the right type of structures and authorities you need to really make your goals and go forward in life. So it really lets you keep an open mind to the proper lessons you need to learn to get ahead in life. And this is an excellent position to have. But now let's look at what Google has to say about that. Saturn in Capricorn is a powerful placement where Saturn is in its sign of rulership, creating a highly disciplined, responsible, and ambitious individual. This person is naturally inclined towards building lasting success through hard work, patience, and strong sense of duty and structure. They are often mature from a young age and may have a serious, reserved demeanor, preferring to lead by example rather than seek attention. And hey, to go back to that award that she won, she was 19 years old. So this shows you right here, with strong work and ambition and a focus on your goals, you can overcome a lot. 19, winning awards like that is huge. Not a lot of people can say that they ever won any of those kind of awards, especially at such a young age. And this right here shows how she had that power to move through and find those things and to actually work on her ambition and stay firm with it. Like I was mentioned earlier about Garth Brooks, it's not always about having the pure talent. It's about having the discipline and knowing about the business and staying steadfast. And not everybody has that, but you see right here, she sure does. And this paragraph reinforces a lot of that. But let's move on and see what the other pages have to say. Scroll down here. Oh, that's Vidic. You know what? We haven't looked at our Cafe Astrology in a bit. Let's take a look at them. Saturn in the signs. Let's scroll down here. Aries. Saturn in Capricorn. Self-preservation instincts are strong with Saturn in Capricorn. You are far more responsible than most people, but you have a love-hate relationship with this side of you. In fact, you may set such high standards for yourself that it can feel much more comfortable to denounce ambition and material success entirely. Walking away can give you a sense of being in control, and fear of not being in control can be a driving force in your life. However, this can be limiting and can serve only to feed your insecurities. In truth, there can be a strong desire for success buried inside you, but you have a hard time accepting your ambition side. It goes on to talk about being careful about internalizing things too much because it could turn you into somebody who's pessimistic, discouraged, or bitter. But in her case, I don't think that's really the case. I think she's had enough success with her focus that she stays true to this. There's one thing you have to watch out. Some other planets sometimes subvert some of this nature, so you don't have the drive. You got to watch out for that. But like I said, in her case, I don't think that's a problem for her at all. I think she's been able to move very well with this, and it's helped her out. It goes on to talk about the heightened sense of responsibility is greater than most people, but the weight of it all can be overwhelming and frustrating. You could move too quickly and get there a little too fast, and it could be a bit much to handle. And I think in some cases it has been a little difficult. Being so young and so successful, it's very intense, and it comes a lot from her own work and drive. It's also a position that you can be really hard on yourself. And with all that much Capricorn, you can be a person that's really hard on yourself. She probably beats herself up a lot when she goes on things to try to get perfection. And it's going to be hard on the personality after a while, but it's made her come far in life. But fear of failure is a persistent thing. And it's something you're going to want, something that these kind of people want to protect themselves from. Let's go down here a little bit. It does talk about some of the bad sides, about being sometimes a little too stern. It might be a little rough on yourself by not letting loose every once in a while and holding way too much of a rigid structure or having absurd standards for yourself. It does also reiterate that you have a tendency to be mature for your age very early on, and you put the pressure on, especially in career struggles and things like that, where you're very intense. And you can internalize rejection. So that can be a problem and a struggle. Something I'm sure she has struggled herself with. That's a pretty good little touch on it. Let's go back. I think a lot of these traits really do personify a lot of things about her and shows a lot about her career and how she's done very well in life. Talks a little bit about her relationships and things like that as well. Everything all in total. Not only romantic, but professional. And I think those of us who've seen her career grow over the decades can see that a lot of these traits show up a lot in how she does things and how life has been to her. All in all, I think this does kind of sum up a lot of her traditional planets and how they affect her individually. Stay tuned for the next video, CD1GP, the generational planets, or the outer planets, where we talk about the 3 outer planets and how they may affect her generationally. These planets aren't as direct as the actual traditional planets or the luminaries, but they do tend to still have an effect. And we'll talk about that in the next video. We hope you have enjoyed this video from our Astrology Keyring series. If you like the content, please like, follow, and share with your friends. Thank you for watching and have a blessed journey.